So first, thanks so much for being here and for helping us frame tonight's discussion on AI and the Bulletin's role in that discussion. So we'll start at the macro level. The Bulletin was founded by scientists who understood that the technology they created would pose unprecedented scientific, military, political, and ethical challenges to the world. Over the years, we recognized that the disruptive technologies that were emerging were capable of posing similar challenges and officially incorporated that topic into our coverage. So as an engineer who helped shepherd technological breakthroughs, and including one that people probably use every single day, could you talk about those early days when you were deep in the code? Were you thinking about how your projects could impact society and our security?
So, I mean, I was much younger. So I definitely didn't have like very deep thoughts. I mean, about how my code is going to affect society. The realization did come kind of home at one point when I still remember like a small party I had with my co-founders of Kazaa after we heard the news that Kazaa is now responsible for 60% of internet traffic. But the thing with Kazaa was that it quite quickly turned from like an engineering project to a legal project, which I guess is also another manifestation of social impact. And in some ways, actually, with Skype, we also kind of expected that there will be like a strong resistance from incumbents. But with the exception of like a couple of countries like UAE, for example, there wasn't. So clearly one lesson I saw that you can have different technologies have like a different level of match with the society, at least.
So the concept of artificial intelligence, which we're talking about tonight, has been around, at least in concept, for nearly as long as the Bulletin. But for most of that time, it was the stuff of science fiction. That's no longer the case. It's all around us. When did you start to focus on AI to the degree you do now, and why?
I mean, my involvement really has kind of grown over the years. But it was really 2008, I want to say, when I stumbled upon the writings of back then a young man in California named Eliezer Yudkowsky. Incidentally, just a couple of months ago, he wrote a book called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And basically the arguments, the book now basically presents the arguments that did convince me. So 16 years ago or 17 years ago, now it's much more polished form. And I remember in March 2009, I kind of wrote Eliezer a cold email that I want to meet when I was in California. And we met up and I talked for like 4 hours. I had like a list of objections to his like doomer view. And he just like shut down all the arguments. I was like, oh, I need to do something about that. So I did.
So when we talk about AI risks, there's the sort of fear of sentient systems working to destroy humanity, but there's also dangerous effects that we're already experiencing: environmental pressures, upending of labor markets, the unregulated incorporation of AI into military systems, and attacks, as I mentioned, on the nature of truth. At the same time, AI can be a force for good across the existential risk space and beyond. So you've posited that we can manage AI risks through both restrictive and constructive efforts. So let's dig in a little bit on that. In the restrictive space, you suggest that we should prioritize aspects such as liability laws, speed limits, which you'll have to tease that out a little bit, and global off switches. So could you say more about these restrictions and how they might be employed?
Yeah, so you're referring to my priorities page, jaan.info/priorities. And as a meta note, they're like from last year, so I need to update them. The idea between division into restrictive and constructive is really that the restrictive parts are things that we kind of need to agree on, kind of plus ideally globally, that we are not going to do. And constructive things are basically things that we could do, even perhaps having like, even not without like having like a global consensus about doing so. Like there are more like things that we could be building. For example, one constructive thing would be to build like more secure hardware. There's the thing called FlexHex, flexible hardware enabled guarantees. So you have like instead of using anyway, I'm not going to go into details there. The things that we need to kind of agree on or restrictive bits indeed are basically some constraints on how do we develop the AI, that we don't just let the kind of economic and geopolitical forces to push us to the place that you might not like. In fact, like the reason why it's kind of preaching to the choir here. The reason why you are in an arms race is because the other people are doing it, right? And whenever you engage in an arms race, you're kind of like constraining what you can do. So like the idea is with the restrictive efforts is actually kind of like swap one constraints for another set of constraints that actually might yield us a better outcome instead of like chasing for the kind of the most powerful capabilities in the least amount of time. Let's build the capabilities that we actually kind of would benefit from rather than something that we kind of might regret.
Well, in that sense, it's similar to the process we went through with nuclear arms control,
Yes.
agreeing on mutually amenable restraints. Even if it meant one country didn't get to do something, you could be assured the other country wasn't doing it. But with nuclear weapons, you can see them, you can touch them, you can see them from space. In terms of restrictions on AI, how do you do that if you can't see it or touch it?
Yeah, it's like there is this like weird situation currently where like if you do, especially in the West, if you do sort of public polls about AI, how do they feel about AI? The sentiment is very negative. Like people do not like the AI, but like the interesting thing is that it's not salient. If you like just ask people what they don't like, they're not going to mention AI. So it's one idea is just to kind of have like a wider societal dialogue about is it where we want to be going as a society, and if not, like what should be changed about, and then change about it, and then kind of like use that as a sort of political mandate to do something on a higher level, because currently in the US there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for constraining AI.
Well, no, certainly there was a sort of a move to prevent states from having that kind of description.
Having a law that there will be no laws.
And when you talk about a global off switch, and I say this as a former diplomat, is that only workable if everybody has global off switches?
So one thing about AI that is very similar to nuclear is that it's very concentrated. These projects are expensive. In fact, I think that currently US is spending, I think was it like one order of magnitude more money per year than it was spending on Manhattan project, even though it comes from like private capital. So which means that there's like a lot of concentration. There's like AI is not a very democratic project at this point. So which kind of the silver lining is that it can make it much more easier to kind of agree about the trajectory, about the constraints, as long as there is kind of political will to do that. So the question is how can we get the political will there?
I mean, part of that starts with having the right people in the room. In many technologies, there's a tendency, particularly among governments, to say, okay, we'll just open an office on this issue. But AI is not something to be set aside. AI is changing the entire landscape, whether it's the economic landscape or the security landscape, that everyone has to be fluent.
The thing I've been saying about AI is sort of like a meta technology. It's a technology that can develop technologies. It's kind of just like a set of capabilities. If you think about it, there's a reason. You mentioned in your talk human generated existential risks, and like there's a reason why chimpanzees don't do those. And like if you think about what is the difference between humans and chimpanzees, it's like a list of capabilities that you can write on a piece of paper, and these are the capabilities that currently like hundreds of billions per year are being put into research and scaling in order to replicate in machines. So perhaps in a few years, yeah, it's not humans, only humans can generate existential risks.
So let's talk again how we manage that. Let's move to the constructive efforts and the prospects for moving constructive efforts forward. And are they likely to garner support among both governments and the private industry?
The nice thing about constructive efforts is that they like require kind of less coordination. Again, there are things like safeguarded AI, basically sort of novel approaches to AI that give you like more guarantees about invariance. Like Yoshua Bengio, like the kind of most cited AI scientists alive. He's more cited than Alan Turing was. He has a project in Montreal about basically building AI that has like more structure to it. That's an example. It doesn't need like a permission of China in order to do that. It's like you can. So constructive efforts are nice like that. Another one, is kind of I think I mentioned FlexX, flexible hardware enable guarantees that you build some basic control layers into your systems that you can then use to have like a policy about what's happening with your hardware. One example they always use is I had my iPhone stolen a few years ago, but it was okay because I could remotely disable it. That's an example of a basic hardware-enabled governance, hardware-enabled governance that you can kind of use even though you no longer have full control over what's happening on your device.
So using technology to manage technology.
Yeah.
So one last question. You're on the board here at the Bulletin's board of sponsors. What role do you see for an organization like this, a media organization, in the necessary critical discussion on AI going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like enough understanding about the details of the organization to be like overly prescriptive here, obviously. But
that's what the board's for.
But there is obviously like a lot of similarities between the nuclear development 80 years ago and what's happening in AI right now. Just to like mention a few. Like one is, again, it's kind of largely concentrated in a couple of countries, the frontier, that is. Second is the scientists involved are very worried. Like in all the top labs, you can just ask people, and they're not going to this is some kind of some silly uninformed sci-fi discussion. They're like genuinely concerned about what's happening. Like one of the top scientists in the labs told me that, Jaan, I really would like to go slower now, but capitalism doesn't let me. So that's another similarity, and obviously like just the power of the thing. In some ways, it's kind of more powerful than atomic weapons. In some ways, like humans are more powerful than atomic weapons because humans can create atomic weapons, and we are going to create something that can create atomic weapons, perhaps something worse even.
Yeah. And I think that's at the core of what the Bulletin has, tried to do for the last 80 years on nuclear weapons, and now to include disruptive technologies and climate change, is both identify the nature of the threat, but then also how do we actually manage that? How do we actually turn back the clock? And I think, one of the things that we're particularly keen on is making sure that the scientists working in the other issue areas that we're focusing on, including biosecurity, including nuclear, are thinking about the intersection of AI and those particular risks, and sort of, it is that force multiplying effect of AI that I feel like maybe some of our experts haven't totally connected with yet, because they're usually not in the same room. Is it your impression that AI people are talking to AI people and not necessarily to nuclear weapons experts, to biosecurity experts?
I mean, there are like now a lot of AI people, so there must be like overlaps. There's certainly kind of interest in what happened with nuclear. People are been kind of studying power plant and like that. Like, I mean, I listened to the making of the atomic bomb because it kind of was repeatedly brought up in AI context. So like people definitely aware that there is like a in some ways similar challenge that we're facing.
Any final thoughts for a room full of people who are potentially already interested in AI or coming to this issue fresh?
Yeah, I think I would just like highlight the thing that in some ways AI is like a meta challenge. It's like I don't want like I'm not confident about. My wife always criticizes me that I sound like too confident about my predictions. I'm not confident. I really don't know. But like if you don't know that you're going to survive, that's like a really bad situation, right? and yeah, the other thing is that in some ways framing AI as just another technology, it kind of like can lull you into like a false sense of security. But again, like it's possible that it will be just another technology, but in some ways it's a technology that can take over the technology development from humans. In fact, like the really concentrated effort now goes into trying to make AI, develop AI, which is like insanely dangerous thing to do. But it's like, again, commercial pressures. So just think about AI as something that is like a more meta than it kind of appears on first glance.
No, it's good advice, and certainly something that we plan to do at the Bulletin. I'm looking at John Mucklin over here, the constructive and restrictive spaces in terms of outlining what we can do, I think is a perfect place for us to dig in. But thank you for helping us frame this debate, frame this discussion, and really help us as we continue to put a marker down on the disruptive tech space and really do what for-profit media and legacy media is not doing, which is giving a place for this discussion to happen going forward. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for your advice and support.
Thank you.